American Top 40.
5 new songs on American Top 40 this week, and this is the highest debuter. Coming in at number 32, first time ever on the charts, The Babies from England with Isn't It Time.
American Top 40.
I'm Kasem. 3 of this week's debuts are by newcomers to the Top 40, Sheila E., Face to Face, and the band Scandal featuring Patti Smythe. Our 4th and highest debuter is by a man who's made previous appearances in the countdown as the lead singer of the English band The Babies. But they've broken up now, and he's a solo artist. Here's John Waite.
American Top 40. Top 40.
I'm Kasem. Now, we're up to the new number 1 song on American Top 40 and the story of the first band to get a recording contract with a video demo. You know, these days it's pretty common for a band seeking a recording contract to submit a video as well as an audio demo of their songs. Some bands submit only a video. Well, someone had to do it first. It happened in 1976 in London. The band who did it were The Babies. It wasn't something they consciously planned from the start. It was more of an act of desperation. The former lead singer and bass player told us, "No one was interested in us. We couldn't get signed because they'd hear the name Babies and think we were like Mickey Mouse and his friends, you know, Pluto and Donald. They wouldn't even listen to a band called The Babies." End of quote. Well, The Babies teamed up with producer Mike Mansfield and filmed themselves performing their songs. And they submitted that video demo on a video cassette to Chrysalis Records. The label executives heard and saw what The Babies were all about. A bona fide rock band. They liked what they heard and saw and signed them up. Well, The Babies had 8 chart hits and 3 top 40s. Then in 1981, the group broke up. But they blazed a trail as the first band to get a recording contract because of a video demo. The former leader, bassist, and lead singer of The Babies is in our countdown with his first top 40 solo hit. And this week, that top 40 solo hit becomes number 1. The new number 1 song in the USA is by a former member of The Babies, John Waite. And the song is Missing You.
American Top 40.
I'm Kasem. Now on American Top 40, we're up to the recent number 1 solo hit by the former lead singer of a group who pulled off a real coup. They were the only recording act ever to appear on Dick Clark's American Bandstand without ever having performed in public and without ever having a hit record. They did it with a blend of ingenuity and luck. Over in London in the fall of '76, this newly formed rock band were hard at work rehearsing 4 songs. They called themselves The Babies, and they had not yet made any recordings or performed anywhere. Now, when they had those 4 songs rehearsed to perfection, instead of recording a regular demo on audio tape, The Babies went to a television studio and had a videotape recording made of themselves performing those 4 songs. Then they mailed video cassette copies to various record companies. Well, several labels responded instantly, but Chrysalis Records made the best offer. So that's who The Babies signed with. Then the record company sent copies of that same videotape to several major TV shows in the United States, among them American Bandstand. Well, Bandstand's producers told us that it's against the show's policy to book any act that hasn't charted or at least performed in public professionally. But they made an exception with this English group because their videotape demo was so impressive. And in February 1977, before any of their records had debuted on the Billboard charts, The Babies gave their first public performance of their career on American Bandstand. A couple of years ago, The Babies broke up, and their lead singer is now a solo act. His first hit went to number 1, and this week it's at number 12.
Kasem, coast to coast.
Now we're up to the number 1 song in the USA, and it's brought to you by Sears. This week's number 1 comes from a band that joins former members of Journey and The Babies. Now, you might wonder what led members of these 2 groups to leave in the first place. After all, not so long ago, each band was doing just fine on its own. In the late 70s, The Babies had 2 top 10 hits, Isn't It Time and Every Time I Think of You. And Journey, of course, was one of the most successful bands of the 80s with number 1 hits like Separate Ways and Who's Crying Now. But of course, as they say, all things must come to an end. The Babies broke up in 1981 after lead singer John Waite launched a solo career. He hit number 1 in '84 with Missing You. But by 1988, a year after Journey had broken up, John decided he'd had enough of working on his own. John says what he really wanted was some tight musical companionship. As he put it, quote, "I didn't really have the desire to go on stage anymore and play with a bunch of guys that were just doing a gig. I wanted to be involved in a band." So John decided to round up a few friends and put a band together. He started with his old pal, keyboard player Jonathan Cain, who'd been in the Babies. Cain had also been a member of Journey, and he suggested calling another former Journey member, guitarist Neil Schon. Then they added another former Baby, bass guitarist Tony Phillips. And just for good measure, they called a musician who wasn't in either band, drummer Dean Castronovo. In the end, the group John Waite came up with was 2 parts Babies, 2 parts Journey, and 1 part in either band. And what do you got when you combine Journey and the Babies? You got Bad English, that's what you got. A new band whose first album has given them their first #1. For the second week in a row, the #1 song in the USA is When I See You Smile from Bad English.
Smile at me.
John Waite. He used to be with a band called The Babies, then he went solo. Now he's singing lead for Bad English on their first top 10 hit ever.
American Top 40.
And now we're up to the band who found their name after a few games of 8-ball. And the story begins earlier this year in San Francisco. The former singer of the band The Babies, John Waite, was working on songs in the studio with keyboardist Jonathan Cain, who'd also been with The Babies and then later joined Journey. Next, Babies bassist Ricky Phillips came along. And then Journey guitarist Neil Schon joined the recording sessions along with drummer Dean Castronovo. Well, now things were going real great, and producer Richie Zito said they were sounding like a real band, but they just didn't have a name. Well, in the studio lounge there was a pool table, and between recordings the guys would play. First for a sushi dinner, and then Neil Schon told us for $10, $20. Eventually it became double or nothing, and soon the guys were actually practicing pool to better their chances of winning. Jonathan Cain even bought himself a book on mastering the game. He read about putting English on the ball. That means to put a spin on the cue ball to help set up the next shot. But when Jonathan first tried it, he kept hitting the cue ball the wrong way, sending it spinning to one side and right into the pocket. He'd look up at the other guys, shake his head and say, "That's just bad English." And there was the name of the band. Well, they racked him up for a debut break 8 weeks ago and put enough spin on the cue ball to sink one in the #1 pocket. And now their song slips to #2.
This is John Waite from Bad English. Hey, Shadow. Little nippy, isn't it? The wind seems to be coming up. That wouldn't mean an AT40 flashback, would it?
Aha, yes indeed, John. Good call. On American Top 40, I'm Shadoe Stevens. Now let's find out how the emotional contrast of the end of one man's relationship and another man's marriage resulted in a top 5 song. That's the story behind the song at #30 this week. It's the current hit by Bad English, and it was written by the band's keyboardist Jonathan Cain and singer John Waite. In an exclusive AT40 interview, John told us about it.
Me and Jonathan Cain sat down in a room full of drum kits in a storage room at Leeds rehearsal studio in the Valley, and decided we were going to write the ultimate rock love song, or try to, aim for the stars and see what you get, really. And I was just breaking up with this girl I'd been living with for about 3 years, and he was getting married the next week. So we tried to write a song that incorporated both worlds, because it seemed quite, black and white. He was coming into something, I was going out of something. The revolving door of love, and I was trying to explain what it was like to be sorry, for falling down, and he was trying to sort of say, I love you, I love you, I love you. But I was trying to come from a place where guys are fallible. The price of love.
Casey's Top 40.
Well, now we're up to the latest hit for John Waite of the group Bad English, who spent the night of his American debut not playing hot music, but sleeping on a cold barroom floor. It was back in the early 70s that Englishman John Waite was a member of a London band called The Boys. At the time, he was a struggling musician dreaming of someday performing in America. Well, after a long year of playing clubs around London, that dream finally came true. The Boys were booked to do a series of club dates in the Midwest beginning on Christmas Eve. Now, there wasn't much of a budget for the tour, and they weren't being paid well, but they were very happy. They finally made it to the United States. John Waite told us the band's first show was supposed to be at a club near Akron, Ohio. So they took a plane from London to New York, where they rented a truck, loaded their equipment, and started driving. With dreams of a great American debut in their heads, they drove through snow, wind, and freezing rain for hours and hours on end. Then, after they'd crossed the border finally into Ohio, their truck broke down. There they were in a small Ohio town in the dead of winter, strangers in a strange land. All the gas stations were closed, and there was no one around to repair their truck. John Waite says, quote, "We were lucky it was Christmas Eve because people felt sorry for us. A bartender told us we could spend the night sleeping in his bar if we promised not to drink any of the liquor. He had one of those fake fireplaces. It looked good, but it was the kind with a red light instead of a fire. It didn't keep us warm. So the night we were supposed to have our big American debut, we spent shivering on a cold barroom floor." These days, 15 years later, small clubs and broken-down trucks far behind, John Waite travels in style. He's traveled all the way to #1, both as a solo artist with Missing You and as lead singer of the band Bad English with When I See You Smile. This week, John and Bad English climbed 2 notches to #7 with a follow-up to that chart topper, Price of Love.
#8.
Fallen 4 notches as a band whose lead singer, John Waite, says his favorite music is punk rock, groups like the Sex Pistols and the Clash. But you'd never know it from the way he sings on this ballad.
American Top 40.
I'm Shadoe Stevens, AT40, and we're up to the band who faced a musician's worst nightmare the very first time they played together in public. It happened last year to the group of all-star musicians originally from Journey and the Babies, Bad English. Now, most bands form, rehearse, and then play live before making a record, but Bad English recorded their album first and then went out on tour. First stop, Tokyo. The guys, guitarist Neil Schon, bass player Ricky Phillips, keyboardist Jonathan Cain, drummer Dean Castronovo, and singer John Waite, they were all excited. And as they stepped on stage to check their instruments, nothing. So they tried the microphones. No sound. They looked out into a sea of thousands of Japanese faces staring back, patiently waiting for the band to play. And finally, the sound came on. Well, it was only 30 seconds, but John Waite says it was the longest 30 seconds of my life, an eternity. And that's the story of the first gig ever for Bad English. Their first hit went all the way to #1. And their third Top 40 hit inches up 5 to #23 this week. Here's Possession.
I can't find myself.
Hi, John Waite from Bad English, and there are many more Billboard numbers of wonder to come as American Top 40 continues.